Oh, hello, and thank you so much for joining me, Liz, today. It's so wonderful to have you here as part of the International Permaculture Festival of Ideas.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Liz, let's just begin with where you are and give us a bit of context because for listeners, this is going to be a really more practical exploration of the how and the where and the why and tips and tricks and ideas. Liz is a BBC gardening expert and she creates content that you'll find links to with YouTube, and she's written best-selling books, and we have someone here who is such an expert with us. So thank you for joining us, and let's just begin. Where are you, and tell us a little bit about your place.
Thank you for those kind words, Morag. That was really nice. I live in Wales, and I'm three-quarters of the way up a small mountain, big hill, whatever you want to call it. It's a north-facing site. It's wet and it's windy. So to try and give you a bit of context, it's probably best to describe it as an oceanic temperate climate. And we're as far north as Canada, but we are warmed by the Gulf Stream. So the warm water comes across the Atlantic and warms the air. So Britain enjoys kind of a really good growing climate. We have long in the summer, we have long daylight hours. But we also have quite long winters. So I know the closer you get to the equator, the shorter your days. It becomes sort of half and half by the midsummer. Whereas for our midsummer, it's getting light. It's starting to get light at sort of 4 a.m, and it's sun goes down at sort of after 10:30 at night. So we have a really long spell, but we're quite a long way from the equator, so our light isn't incredibly bright. You've visited here, Morag, several times, so you know that the light in Britain is not the same bright, intense light that you have in Australia. So I guess that the length of time that we get for growing in a day is to compensate for the fact that the light isn't as bright.
So your garden there, where you are, how big are you working on now? Because I know that you've moved sites a couple of years ago
Yeah.
from a smaller site to a bigger site, and what I understood was the site that you were growing at before, which I didn't get a chance to come and visit you at, you were growing like up to 85% of your food and beverages there, which is a phenomenal thing. So I mean, maybe you could just tell us, that sort of scale of what you're working on now, and what are your growing goals? I mean, is self-sufficiency the thing? What is the core underpinning goal of what you do?
So our last site was 4/5 of an acre, 8/10 of an acre, and I grew all that food for us, and I also ran a CSA veg box scheme from that site. And so when we moved here, I was kind of quite comfortable with the size of that piece of land. And although we have 4.5 acres, what I've done is actually replicated a space that we had previously, because I know that I can cope with that. I know I can manage that amount of space comfortably without it becoming the feeling of getting overburdened. And it's very easy to go, oh, I've got all this lovely space and we have 4.5 acres. But it would be very easy to go, oh, I'll grow on all of it. And then you suddenly go, oh, no, I can't cope with this. So I've started small. As I, forever saying to people, start small and then grow out. So I'm managing just over an acre now of vegetable garden. There's an orchard, and then there is just over a half-acre food forest. And my goals again are to get to the point where most of our meals. Sorry, the cat has arrived. He's announcing himself. I want to get to the point where the majority of what's on our plate and in our glasses with each meal has come from the land. And I think that's probably going to take, maybe by the end of this year, we're going to be looking at sort of 70% of what we're eating is home
How long have
produced.
you been on that site? So, like in terms of how long it takes you to get to that level of self-sufficiency in your household?
So we moved in I put my first plant in the ground on 1st of July 2021. So not 3 years yet.
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is that it doesn't take a huge amount of space necessarily or a huge amount of time to get from a blank space to that level of abundance. So, Liz,
I
tell us.
think you can do it on a much smaller scale. I mean, I've been quite generous in the space between growing beds. So in my vegetable garden, I've got a metre or 1 metre 20 between each bed, which allows me enough space to kind of actually kneel down on the floor and have room for my legs without having to twist them around and things. And I've done that because I have the luxury of the space. And the beds in the food forest, which is they're grown as sort of a linear system to help with the light and water movement on our land. Those beds are at least 5 metres apart, and some of them are 6 metres apart. And then they're only 120 wide or 2 metres wide, depending on which bed it is. So I've given myself, an awful lot of room. If I concentrated those beds all together, we could easily provide for ourselves and have some ducks and things. I think on 1/4 acre.
So this is amazing. Like even in some of suburban areas of Australia, people have a quarter of an acre. That they can grow in and around their house and on the verges and maybe down the street in a community garden. So a small piece of land to get that abundance. So in order to get that level of abundance, and particularly as you were saying, you have a limited amount of like growing months because you have a long winter. Like, what are your handful of key tips and tricks? One, to get that level of abundance so quickly, and the other is to actually make sure that you've got stuff to eat all year round, in that kind of climate.
I think the first one is stop worrying about what it looks like and just get the plants in. It was one of the things that, I will create a bed, and I have raised beds because we have a very steep slope. So we have raised beds to kind of level the beds out. And I made one bed and I planted it up. And I know I've got lots of friends who would have built all the beds and then got them all filled and then planted. And I kind of went, I need food first. Food was my priority. So it was build a bed, plant it up, build the next bed, plant it up. And grow what you like, grow what you know you like to eat is the way to start it quickly. and then you can experiment with trying new things. But it was very much a case of put in what I know I like to eat, put in food that I know Mr. J will eat, because they aren't necessarily the same things, and get those growing. And then I had the luxury of saying, okay, well, let's now try other things. And the
So, what are
very
some
first
of your big? Sorry, Liz. I was going to ask you, what are some of those? Like the highlights of your garden. Like, what can you not do without in your garden? That one is like favorite flavors, and the other is like abundant, long harvest for you. They might not be the same thing, but yeah.
So beetroot, so all beets of various different shapes, sizes, and colours. We both absolutely love those. Neither of us liked them as children, but now we've discovered what they taste like when they're homegrown. It's just like a whole new world for us. So I grow an awful lot of beets. And soft fruit is the other thing that I grow. I try and grow things that are expensive in the stores. So anything that needs to be hand picked, so salad leaves, berries, currants, which you and I talked about the last time you were here, and also to try and get in fruit trees really early. So I tried to get the sort of stone fruits and things like apples and pears in, because they're just going to take longer to start producing a crop. So definitely raspberries. I know I grow a huge number of raspberries because I love them, and I would actually quite happily eat raspberries all year round. And probably beans are the other thing. So I grow a runner bean called a Greek gigantes. That's the variety, and they are huge. And you don't grow them for the green pod. You wait until they're all grown and the pods start turning yellow, and then you harvest them for the white bean on the inside, which is, it's probably 5 centimetres high by 2 to 3 centimetres across. It's a big, big bean. Literally, as the name suggests, it's gigantic. And it
So
tastes
that's like a huge meal of protein that you're growing
it's
there, isn't
a
it?
huge meal. And it tastes of creamy mashed potato.
Oh, yum. Yum.
So when we don't have potatoes, we have the beans, and I cook them and freeze them in sort of portion size blocks of beans, so I can just go to the freezer anytime, just grab some beans to add to a meal.
Actually, that's something that I was so impressed at your place when I was there. Some people have very organized pantries and freezers, and you are one of those people. Because I live in the subtropics, I haven't quite honestly got to that level of organization, because it's like, oh, what should I get today? And I'll just pop out, oh, look, the pumpkin looks good today. Like it's just always growing. I wish I
Yeah.
was a bit more organized and spread out my harvest in that way. But
But
how do you plan for that?
I would be like you if we had that length of growing season. I mean, I am hugely envious that you can just pop outside, and every time I see you go, oh, I'm just going to go and get a few bits from the garden, I'm like, oh, it's the middle of winter.
I know, so it's like we always look to what the other person's got. I think, oh, I wish I was a bit more organised to, like preserve this and preserve that, and I should do that kind of thing. But yes, alas, I love foraging and just finding what's there for the day. But to come back to the question around how do you plan that? How do you process most of your foods? Because you had it very well organized in terms of your fruits and your vegetables and all sorts of things in, like you're saying, in portion sizes in your
Yeah.
freezer, which is super accessible.
Part of the reason that I do that, Morag, is that I have SAD. So in the winter, as the light levels start dipping, I'm not going to say I shut down, but I certainly slow down, and my enthusiasm for spending much time in the kitchen wanes to almost zero. And I always say, come November, it's pajama o'clock. And I kind of, I don't literally spend the whole winter in my pajamas, but I have lost interest in each day by about 3:30. And we need to eat after that in a day. So some of it is that I spend my autumn doing masses of harvesting and batch cooking meals. And even if I'm not batch cooking a meal, if I'm cooking a meal from scratch, I'll always cook more than the 2 portions that we need, so that I can then freeze some as well. So I just kind of try and keep the freezer stocked up with foods. A bit like if you go to a supermarket and you buy a ready meal and all you've got to do is heat it up. That's what we have, but they're home cooked ready meals.
Yeah. Is that a big problem in the UK, like SAD?
I think it is. I think people, the light levels are lower, and just as in the summer we have that really long growing time, in the winter my husband and most people go to work in the dark. In the middle of winter, you'll go to school in the dark, and you come home in the dark. So it's there's an awful lot of time where you haven't got the light, and then the winter light levels are quite low. So the government recommends that we take vitamin D. I think they actually recommend it all year round, but certainly they recommend it for the winter to help boost all those things that vitamin D boosts, and one of those is how you're coping with light levels.
So while we're talking about health, maybe we could talk about how gardening has helped you in your health, because you began in your book Grounded talking about how being a gardener and shifting your life into this way of basically your way of life and your livelihood being based in your garden helped you overcome chronic illness.
Yes,
Can you speak
absolutely.
a bit about that? Because I know it's a few years ago, but it's a really important part of this story about what you're doing.
And it's a recurring theme, Morag. It's not something that has just gone. I'm probably back to some extent where I was 7 years ago at the moment. So my thyroid started failing. And I hadn't realised what was going on. All I knew was I wasn't feeling great, and I wasn't feeling, I was feeling quite poorly all the time, and I was very tired. And eventually my body kind of wasn't getting enough nutrients at all. So I had sort of malnutrition or undernutrition. And I ended up going to bed for about 4 months. And when I say I was in bed, it wasn't just like a bit. It was 24 hours a day, except for when I got up to use the bathroom. And I slept for most of it. I put on awful programmes on the television, like those box sets of programmes, and I would fall asleep very quickly. And my husband used to say all he would hear is the music on repeat for like hours on end, because I'd obviously gone to sleep and not pressed the button for the next episode. So when we then, in the middle of being all that, we found our previous home. We moved there, and I kind of, in my head, I went, right, okay, well, whatever it takes, I'm going to have to get up and do this, because this is my dream. A little cottage with a big garden. I'm not going to lie in bed while my dream is out the side the door. And so I literally got up. I was using walking sticks, and I kind of learnt to sort of do a couple of steps and then push a wheelbarrow a few feet, and then carry on using my walking sticks. It was very slow, but over time, as my thyroid medication started working a bit, and moving and exercising and everything, and I all started feeling better. And I was outside in the sunshine getting more vitamin D and vitamin G and all those other things that they talk about. And also, as our diet improved and we were eating less and less processed food and more fresh food, my health grew at the same time as the garden developed. So it was almost like, as I healed the pretty poor soil in the garden, I didn't heal it. As it was healing, and then I was healing as well. And I saw a very similar thing happen when we moved here, because we didn't have as much fresh food just to pop outside and pick it in the garden. And we went back to eating shop bought processed food. And again, I've put on masses of weight, and I'm feeling very sluggish and all of those things. So I'm looking forward to, by the end of this year, being my diet getting back to a much healthier one. And then hopefully I'll see all those benefits that I saw at my last garden will start again here.
Yeah, it's an amazing transformation, isn't it? I mean, quite rapidly from shifting, just that fundamental thing about what you're eating and how you're doing it. But what a courageous thing though, to get up and just take it at a pace. And I guess the lessons that you learned about how to grow and what to grow and how to make the most of your time stemmed from that time when you only had a certain amount of energy, and in that time you needed to grow as much as you possibly could. So how do you keep it simple? I mean, those sorts of tips and tricks are just essential, aren't they?
Yeah, so yes, I do keep it. The answer is I keep it simple. I try not to think about it too much. If I like it and I've got the seed packet with me and there's a space in the garden, I grow them there. That's where they're going to grow. I don't kind of go, oh, I need to go and create a new bed, or I need to clear something. It's like, there's a gap, I'll fill it. Because if I don't fill it with veg seeds, nature's going to fill it with weeds. So, I'd rather have the veg in there. Yeah. And I think in terms of pacing myself, it's just literally, I am so stubborn. I am so, in a good way. Just heels in. It's like, I am going to do this. And I felt it at the previous place, and I feel it here. It's just that thing of, I am going to do it because this is for me. This is not this. I know I'm not creating a show garden. I'm not creating something that's going to look lovely on my videos. That garden's really personally for me. Luckily, my husband really enjoys it, so he comes out. He's not a gardener, so he doesn't do any of that sort of gardening. He will help me carry stuff that's too heavy for me to carry, and he will mow the grass on a ride-on mower and that. But if it comes to weeding or planting or making any planting decisions, he's not going to make any of those. That's all up to me to decide. And occasionally I'll stand there and say, do you want an apple tree here? And he'll look at me and go, So it's what I'm really saying is, I want to put an apple tree here. Give me permission to go and buy another apple tree. And I don't even need the permission. I just kind of want it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're saying it's a garden that's just it's for you. It's your special place
Yeah.
that makes you feel good and nourishes your body and your soul.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you've also created a phenomenal YouTube channel and a book and a whole lot of other media content around this journey of doing it. Can you walk us through a little bit about how this whole journey with videos began for you and
Yeah.
it's become really popular?
Thank you. Yes, it has. So actually, all started when I first got ill, and I was bedbound. I kind of felt like I was in touch with nobody at all. I felt really isolated. And so I joined a thyroid support group, and we were exchanging stories and things. And someone said to me, you need to turn this into a blog. People need to be able to read this because your writing is quite funny. So when we decided to buy our last house, I thought, right, now is the time. And I started a blog to share my journey. And 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 it was literally a journey from one place to another, and then from ill health to being in a pretty good place. But the part of writing that blog was so that I felt like I had contact with people in the outside world. And so I did that for about a year, and then I was trying to explain how I had layered up straw and spent brewery grain to make a hotbed, and planted what I planted big squashes in the top of it, in planting pockets in the top of it. And I was trying to explain it, and it was like, it's just going to take 30 photographs, or I can just run out and video for like a minute and a half. So I kind of did this awful video without me being in it, just sort of facing and then you can just see this hand pointing where I'm trying to show things. But it meant that was actually such a quick process in comparison to writing. I started thinking, okay, actually, I could use a few more videos in my blog. And then around that time, there were American YouTube channels that were really encouraging people to start daily vlogging. And YouTube were very much promoting homesteading and daily vloggers. And if you had a daily vlog that was also homesteading, they were really pushing it. So it was like, oh, well, maybe I'll try doing that. And maybe there is a way to create an income there. And not for 1 minute did I think, oh, people are going to start knowing who I am. Very naive, this one. The thought process was just, people will watch it, but obviously they're not going to know who I am. So after 6, 7 years, maybe it was after 5 years, I went to the Oxford Real Farming Conference in Oxfordshire. So that was 2020, just before the pandemic hit here. And I spoke to Maddie Harland from Permanent Publications and Permaculture magazine. And she said, Liz, would you like to write a book? Would you like to tell your story? We would really like to publish a book telling your story. And so that's what I did. I wrote Grounded, and the writing books and creating videos have kind of gone hand in hand with each other. They both tell stories, and they tell a similar story, but from in a different way. Right, a 70,000 word book is going to give you a lot more in depth than a 10-minute video is going to give you. And so I've done the two hand in hand. So here we are now. I've just finished 7 years of videos. There's over 125,000 people who subscribe. I am stunned by the following and how lovely people are. And I hear from people all the time. So a couple of days ago, I had an email from someone who said, I've been watching your YouTube channel for 6 years or so. And I do remember having seen her leaving comments from very early on. And she said, and I recently bought your first book and I'm about halfway through it. And then she told me how it had impacted her, how my story had encouraged her and things. It's so humbling and it is so encouraging when people contact me and say what you do has touched us, has met some sort of need in them. It's been a privilege to be able to do that.
From being, like you're saying, and feeling quite isolated to all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, you've put a lot of years into this, but, that's that shift and change to being very connected, not just in Wales, but globally as well, with community of people who follow your work and engage in the work that you do. But you are also active in your local community too, running workshops and getting involved in. So tell us a little bit about that process of how you've managed to find your way to be connected in your local community, because you've just moved to this new neighbourhood and didn't really know anyone personally. People might have known you, obviously, but, it wasn't really a neighbourhood community yet for you.
So I was lucky enough to know quite a few people who lived in this part of Wales. So when I moved here, I didn't feel completely isolated. But I think it does take time to meet local residents. If you have school-aged children, it's brilliant. And the younger they are, the better, because then you meet each other at school gates. If you're at an age where you're a grandma and your grandchildren are about to leave school, there's less chance to meet people locally. So I spent quite a lot of time joining groups on Facebook and trying to make contact with people that way. And then out of sheer coincidence, I took a booking for a course here. I took a block booking for 8 or 10 people from a local organisation. And I was like, oh, who are these? And I looked them up, and they do the most amazing things with wind power and solar power and developing a new community hub. And they've got so many links and a repair cafe and all sorts of stuff that they're doing. It's really exciting. And so I said to them, I'd love to be involved at some level, and said, are you going to do a seed swap? And they went, well, we could do. And I said, great. Can I help you organise that? So we held our first local seed swap back in March. She can't even remember. Maybe it was March. And more as I've been involved with that, I have met more and more local people. And so we've sort of I've built a network of friends here like that. But I think it takes a concerted effort. If you move to a new area, you need to reach out, you need to join groups, and you're going to meet a whole load of people that aren't your cup of tea. And that's fine. But they might have friends who are your cup of tea, or they might say, have you heard of? And you can go that, to that place.
And like you were saying too, to offer in something that feels like something that you like to be involved in, because if that's the case, there's probably other people as well. So perhaps you could just give us a little bit of a rundown of how does one start a seed exchange network in a community? Because that's a really, it's such a critical thing. The state of the seeds in the world. This is something that it needs to be hyper-local in this way. So how have you made it happen and got people involved?
So we've used the wonders of the internet, and for all the, I think, the internet is not a great thing for a whole number of reasons. For things like this, it is brilliant. So we advertised, we chose a date, we booked a hall, and we found a little bit of funding through this charitable organisation to pay for the rent of the hall. And we got a group of volunteers together, and we all agreed that, what day it would be. And then we created a poster, and we put it in various different local groups on Facebook. And then I created a video with the chair of this organisation, and we just went out and went, we're going to do a seed swap, come and join us. And so we advertised to people, please bring your seeds and drop them off beforehand. And some people dropped them off beforehand, some people brought some on the day. And on the day, we literally set up the hall with some tables and had some baskets. I had gone through my embarrassment of seeds, my huge hoarding of seeds. And, there's no point in me having more seeds than I'm going to grow in a lifetime. So it was great to be able to share all of those. And lots of magazines give away seeds free. And I contacted a couple of seed companies and asked if they'd send some, and they did. And so just before the seed swap, a couple of volunteers came up here and we got loads of baskets out, and we literally sorted out the seeds alphabetically so we could lay them out on the tables alphabetically. And people just literally came in, they brought some seeds, we then added those to the baskets and they ruffled through. And I had sort of said in my mind, if we'd had 12 people come through the door, I was going to be really happy, because, I was happy to start small, and then they would go away and tell their friends about it, and then next year there would be more. So we think there was probably over 40 people came. The first one, this is a really small rural village in rural West Wales. So I was very excited to see that, and hopefully next year it'll be a bit bigger again, and when people learn that they can come and get seeds, and then they can save seeds, and hopefully next year hopefully next year I'll be able to do a talk about how to save seeds, and so people can take their seeds and then they'll remember to save them and then bring them back. So it is that thing of having that local resource. And once the community centre, the new community centre, is up and running, I actually think we're going to have a seed library there. So we'll just have a shelf that's got, boxes with packets of seeds in them.
Yeah, great. I think, a seed library or a seed exchange network of some kind for every neighbourhood. I think that is one of those ideas that needs to spread and start. And like you're saying, start simply, start small, start with a group of friends, start with a small neighbourhood group and just grow it from there. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, I want to move back to your food forest, because you mentioned that earlier. And I know when people hear the word food forest, their ears prick up, because it's such a fantastic concept in terms of thinking about perennial foods, abundance of food, wildlife habitat, lower maintenance, all these different types of benefits from it. Now, can you maybe just describe a little bit about your food forest and how it might differ from what you think is the sort of the standard concept of it? You already described that it's more in rows, it's more spacious for your light. Another thing that I think is different about it too is that you have the rows kind of going down the hill, which helps to release the water from your system because of your soil situation, which is quite different from, say, if I was to start one up here, I'd be going swale across the contours and really trying to hold everything on site. So let's talk about West Wales, wet West Wales, that's actually wetter than normal. You were saying earlier about it's like 35, like you've not had this amount of rain that any farmer can remember. So
yeah. So over the last 3 or 4 years, the volume of rain that we're getting is increasing. And this is a fairly wet area. I mean, Wales has a well-deserved reputation for being a fairly rainy place. The rain comes in from the west and it kind of gets stuck on the hills here, and it just dumps all the rain, and then the clouds move on a bit before they dump the next lot somewhere else. But so we get the kind of majority of the rain, and the further east you go in the UK, the drier it tends to be. So one of the things I don't want to do is particularly keep a lot of water on the land. I want to try and get it off as quickly as possible. So we are on a slope. It's a north-facing slope. We're in the middle of a wind farm, so it's also very windy here. So I chose just about the most challenging conditions I could find to grow in. But we do have water, and I actually think I would find it more challenging in some ways if there was, a lack of water. So I'm not poo-pooing having this lots of water, but I am aware that I do need to get it off the land fairly quickly, because otherwise plants are just sitting in waterlogged soil for months and months on end.
I remember walking across the top of your food forest, and it wasn't even the wettest of times, and we were like splushing our way across, weren't we? Like every time I put my foot down, the water just kind of like oozed up around my foot. It was, I've not experienced that kind of wetness before, honestly. Yeah.
It's yeah, and that's at the top. I mean, that was I
Yeah,
still
that's right. That's
like
right.
in my head, the bottom of the food forest should be wetter, but actually that's about there being quite a lot of peat in the soil at the top, and it's not at the bottom of that space. So it's more clayey, so the water just tends to pool and then run off. Whereas at the top, where it's more peaty, it holds it in the soil. So I've got these rows, and when I first designed it, they're not quite due north south. They're very slightly at an angle, just because of the way the land lies. But I wanted to make sure that as the sun went round, it wasn't going to cast too many shadows and too much shade on the other plants. So this way, it allowed the sun to get to all of the plants. It's going to allow the water to run off fairly quickly. And I was just going to plant them in vague lines, higgledy-piggledy, and it would be great. And each line could kind of spread out over time. But I have someone who comes once a week, 8 months a year, to help with like grass maintenance and trimming and hedge cutting. And they said, I don't know where to trim up to. I don't know where the edge of this bed is, and I don't want to trim away a plant thinking it's a weed, because I don't really know these plants. Is there any chance I could have edges to these beds? So we then spent quite a long time using recycled wood, creating edges to the beds, which makes it look much more formal than I would have wanted it to. But at the same time, there's something I quite like about that. But it means that we now have these kind of sort of semi-formal beds that are food forest with mowed grass in between, and we allow it to grow quite long before it's mowed. So there's lots and lots of wildflowers coming. And in some of the rows, the planted beds, there are what you would recognise in a food forest. So there are those multiple layers. And in some of them, there's probably only 2 or 3 layers. So there are some fruit trees, there are maybe 1 or 2 shrubs, and then the rest is left to grow like a wildflower meadow. So I have these strips of land that are sort of 60, 70 feet long. Sorry, I don't know it in metres. And then 4 feet or 6 feet, so 120 or 2 metres wide. I've just allowed the grasses to grow. So it's got all the plantains and dandelions, and then the wild grasses come up. And so when you look across, it's like, well, this is what the thing would be like if we didn't mow the strips in between. And it's actually really lovely. And you can hear it as you walk past it. It is just buzzing with life. So you can hear crickets or grasshoppers, and you can hear bees and hoverflies and all those other winged insects. And it's just teeming with life.
Have you noticed a more bird life coming into your garden? I mean, what have you noticed in terms of biodiversity change since you've started adding all these features into your place?
So yes, so previously this was an equestrian site, so it had sheep and horses on it, and the grass was basically raised to the ground. It was just, it was overgrazed, so there was clumps of bits of grass and plantains, but mostly there was a lot of earth and soil that you could see, and we let the grass grow completely unchecked for a year to kind of start healing the ground, which allowed an awful lot of insects to kind of go, oh yeah, this is a safe place to be. So there are more birds coming in. There are lots of butterflies. There's lots of insects coming in. Frogs have appeared from the stream, have now come and made a home in our various ponds that I've put in. And then last year, we were getting the duck house, which had been empty for a couple of months. We were getting it ready for new ducks arriving, and I kind of went, oh, there's something living under the duck house. And first of all, I thought it was a rat, because I just saw this tail, and then I thought, oh no, nothing moves. A rat doesn't move like that. And it was a kind of this zigzag. So we went back and just stood and looked, and there was a common lizard, which I'm saying it's common. That's just its name. In over six decades, I've never seen one. So it was the first time I'd seen one, and I was absolutely fascinated. It was beautiful, and it just climbed up the side of the duck house, the wooden duck house, and it just bathed in the sunshine, and it was just wonderful. And I managed to take
Yeah,
loads of photographs and let me film it, and I was very, very quiet and very calm, and every time it sort of ducked under the duck house, I let it, waited till it came out again. So that was an absolute privilege to feel that this area is now secure enough to have something as rare as a lizard growing, a lizard living here.
yeah, yeah. That's beautiful, and it's as you develop the site more and more of the land heals itself, you'll notice more and more of that. One of the things that I came away from your place, it's like the word just keeps going around in my head. Your shrubbery. I love your shrubbery. Half because I think, it makes me think of Monty Python, and that's always so funny with the Monty Python shrubbery. But you've got this whole edge, this really long edge of your garden, which you're planting up as a shrubbery. Now, I am fascinated by the potential of this idea. So it's kind of like the midway between having a food forest and having a veggie garden is a shrubbery, which is full of beautiful plants, edible plants, habitat plants. Can you tell us a little bit about your shrubbery? I'm sorry, I have to say it. Every time I say it funny. Just shrubbery. I can just say shrubbery, right? That,
Yes, so
what motivated you? And yeah.
along one fence line, I've put hornbeam hedging, and it's the only area where I've got a single variety hedging. Everywhere else, I've put in mixed native hedging. But I wanted something that looked fairly formal to kind of provide this edge to the food forest, and then I've got a strip that is 130 feet. Have I got to try and work out what that is in meters? No,
It's
I'm
all
not
right.
good
Don't
at
worry. We can work it
it.
out.
It's about 130 feet long and maybe 10 to 15 feet wide, maybe 10 feet wide from front to back. And I filled it with just all my favourite plants. It's just like, I wanted somewhere to have this sort of a bank of colour and leaf that doesn't require a huge amount of attending to. It doesn't really require me to cut it back. I don't really need to prune anything. It will just, things will just grow. So I've used a membrane on the ground, which is a cornstarch membrane, and it's plastic free, and it lasts for about 3 years before it even starts breaking down at all. And so I think it's cornstarch and something like chopped miscanthus. So it almost feels like a material. It's there's no plastic in it. It doesn't feel plasticky. So I've used that to just put down and try and reduce the weed competition. And then, of course, we've got couch grass, which is very like Bermuda grass or any of the other kind of invasive grasses, and that's grown all over the top of it. Not hugely useful, but I'm just letting it happen because that's fine. I have to measure my time of how much I'm going to spend on an ornamental area. And I'm sure next time you come and visit, you will see the difference. It doesn't really take very long for a shrub that's happy in the site to get really quite big. So what I want is maybe in 3 to 5 years' time, is that area will be completely maintenance free. It will be completely filled up with shrubs, and they'll get to anything up for 2 meters plus, and we'll just fill that space with colour. So there'll be leaves, there'll be lots of branches for things to nest in and hide in and live in. There'll be a riot of colour from the flowers. Then there'll be berries, which will provide food for wildlife, and seeds for me to be able to grow more plants if I want to. And
Fantastic.
I had a small shrubbery at our last place, about 40 feet long, and again the same sort of depth. And I kind of put these little plants in that was like this size, and I was looking like the size of a football, thinking, oh, I don't know that's ever going to grow. But within 5 years, they were all touching each other. They were 3-4 feet high, and it was a joy. And so that's what I want to do again. And I've put in lots and lots of plants that flower and are fragrant during the winter. So if I want to see them and enjoy them, I've actually got to get out of the house in the winter and walk to the far end of our garden to see them. And that was quite an intentional thing, because it means that in the winter I'm going to go, oh, I wonder if the witch hazel's out yet, and so I will actually have to put on a coat and my wellies and go out and have a look.
There was one other space that I know in your garden which adds a lot of different dimensions, and that's your polytunnel, and it adds you a different climate, like maybe something that's a little bit maybe water managed or temperature managed. How does that fit into your whole picture, and how does that help your system?
So having the polytunnel is such a blessing. It means that a lot of the wind damage that could be done to plants isn't done. There's less rain coming down, and there are plenty of things that come down in the rain that are going to mean growing some plants is more difficult outside. So in my polytunnel, rather than growing a lot of veg that, and I know lots of people do, people will extend their growing season. They will grow huge amounts of veg right through the year in their polytunnel. But I've chosen to grow fruit trees and grapevines in mine. So again, I'm looking at that fruit thing. So I've got 2 peach trees which I planted in there 2 years ago. I'm trying to think, it must be 2 years ago now. And they're not suffering from peach leaf curl, and I don't know if that's something that you have there, but it's peach leaf curl comes down in the rain, and here it comes down in the rain between January and the end of May, and can wipe a plant out in 4, 5, 6 years. So I've got 2 peaches in the polytunnel which are just prolific in they are so abundant. Last year we ate, I would sort of wander up to the polytunnel and eat 4 peaches, while I'm just sort of standing around, and then I kind of bring a handful and then a basketful back, and we'd have a load in the house, and then I was giving them to the neighbours, and then the neighbours got to the point of saying, actually, we've got enough, thank you. I'm like, what am I going to do with all these peaches? So I ended up making like a mango chutney, but a peach chutney to have with, as a condiment, and that just feels so special to grow peaches. And so I'm hoping over the next couple of years, as the plants get more established and a bigger root system, even the peaches will become bigger, and I'll learn new skills in terms of pruning them and understanding how to get the best crop from them.
And so one of the things that you do so well is share your knowledge so freely. Every time you're learning something, or you've got tips, you're sharing them out in your videos and your blogs and the books, and you've just put out like a gardening journal now that has lots of information in it as well, and you've got a cookbook that's got some of your favorite recipes in it. So, like, as an educator, not necessarily standing up teaching a permaculture design course somewhere, but educating every day on all the things that people need to know, how to grow easy, simple, sustainable food wherever you are, right around you. It's just extraordinary, the amount of content that you've created. It's like you said, there's like 123 or 125,000 viewers, subscribers on your YouTube, but there's millions of views though, like millions, literally millions of views. So people are accessing this content. So how often now are you putting out new videos that people can access?
Well, so the theory is once a week. It hasn't really happened. So this spring has been tough. We've had a lot of rain, and I've been quite low. So I've kind of said, well, okay, I'll just put out content when I feel up to going out and standing in the rain and recording it. But actually, I need to do it more often because I am so excited about the things that I'm learning. And that's part of the reason that I share so much is I need to tell someone because it's so exciting. It's not because I think people need to know. It's just that it is that thing of the community and in contact with people that I was saying about. It's the equivalent of being able to pick up the phone and say to my parents, Mum, guess what what I've just found out? Well, my parents are no longer with us, so I do the same thing on a video or on social media or in a magazine article or whatever. It's me going, oh, look how exciting this is. And yes, lots of people probably already know that, but I've only just learnt it. So I want to tell other people about this amazing thing that I've just learnt.
And like if you've just learned it, obviously so many other people are just going to learn it as well from you. And I think there's a really lovely way that you share it as well. Like it feels like you're just there in your garden with you. You're just talking, like if I'm watching it, you're just talking to me, Liz, like I'm there with you in your garden and you're telling me what's going on. And it's really wonderful. I'm going to share all the links to Liz's work in the show notes so you can check that out. So you have 2 books that people can access. One is called Grounded. Yeah, please share it. So Grounded,
which
and
is
these are
story of our previous garden and healing the land and healing me. And then the second one is The Seasoned Gardener, and this is it's more of a gardening based book. There are still lots of stories, lots of sort of silly bits of things that I've got up to. But rather than most books, gardening books start in January and go through to December, and they tell you what to sow and what to grow. So I've done this kind of a bit of a different way around. This starts in the autumn. So it starts in September, and rather than what to sow, it's what I'm harvesting. So it's just based around what I'm harvesting, some of my memories of particular things, what things that I've learnt that, if you do this to it, it tastes great. And now I don't need to do what I used to do to it anymore. Or, or I've tried this and that really didn't work for me. So I've tried to share the knowledge that I've, the accidents I've done along the way in terms of growing food, and feel lots of, I don't really want to call it advice, but maybe just experience.
And have you got your journal and your?
So the little journal I've just produced, because I've kept a gardening journal for 25 years. I'm trying to think when I first started, probably the turn of the century. And doesn't time go by quickly? And I've always kept basically just a book in the downstairs loo, lavatory, toilet, whatever you want to call it, in that room, the cloakroom downstairs, which means that when I come in from the garden, usually the first thing I do is go into that room and I can write down what I've been doing. So I can write down when I've sown things and when I've pricked them out or potted them on or planted them out into the garden, when I've harvested, and then I try and make notes of things like, this was really prolific, don't plant so many next year, or we loved this, grow more. And I don't do one book a year, I kind of carry them on, and so I just filled up the book. And so I wanted to create something that other people could use rather than just a plain book. So I've done exactly that. It's got pages for people to, I'm just trying to find a page. Let me show you. So there's pages where there's just blanked and lined for notes. But then this page has got a space for saying what seed it is, when you've sown it. And then almost all the pages, not all, almost all the pages have got a little quote on them, an inspirational quote or an idea. There's information about composting, about things that you can grow very quickly, rapid seeds. There is a seed sowing guide, which doesn't apply to one place or another, because it just says early spring, mid-spring, late spring, so it will apply to wherever you are. And I wanted something that people could fold up and shove in their back pocket and take out into the garden. And when I looked at what was available, they were either very prescriptive in terms of they had dates in them. And it was like, well, that doesn't really work for me because I want to be able to follow through one crop at a time rather than a date. Or they were incredibly expensive. And the other thing was, quite a lot of them were really quite big, which for me doesn't work because I want something I can, shove in my pocket or into my bag and take with me. And I don't want something that won't, I want it to fit on a windowsill in the bathroom so that I can just pop in and write a note in there. So I created the book that I want to use.
And that's so great, isn't it? Because, like you said, to have that book that gives a structure. Like, so your experience of how to take notes. Often, as a beginner gardener too, you think, oh, what should I write about? What note should I take? And so giving that kind of structure to get started, I think, is so so helpful, and really encourage people to get a journal going. I like to do, like, I'm not an artist, but I also like to try and do like little sketches sometimes. I have landscape architecture training, so I'm more, do those sorts of drawings as opposed to artistic, beautiful botanical drawings. But in my heart, I would love to be a botanical artist, so I like spaces where I can do some little sketches as well, which is really nice. Yeah, I wish I could do that. That's one of my, on my bucket list, to actually be an artist.
Reason I'm laughing quite so much is that, okay, so if I draw a stick man, most people don't kind of work out what it is. My drawing is awful.
But your video making is beautiful, and like one of the things that you were saying to me when I was there was that how much effort you now put into the video production,
Yeah.
which is different from what you were doing when you first started, holding your phone and pointing at things. Like, you actually spent a lot of time in the video editing and thinking about the pace and the rhythm and lighting and really, the message behind things too. Can you maybe give us a few tips on how, if people want to actually start videoing, what would be some good tips you'd give them?
I think if people are going to start, use your phone, go out there and just do it, and don't worry too much about making something that is a television worthy. So record that information. That's the important bit, is record the information and get it across. And I did that. I mean, I have produced about 1,000 videos now. And so I did that for a very long time. And then I sort of went, do you know what? Actually, I want to create something that's visually stunning. And part of that was my garden had become visually stunning. I mean, every time I walked out, I kind of went, oh, I love it here. I love this. And I wanted to be able to try and convey that on film, so that other people could experience that sort of moment of, it's nice here. And creating a new garden. And I think it's coming. I think I'm kind of getting to the point now where I walk outside and go, yes, this is starting to look really lovely. And so I think it's become easier this year to create those sort of visually stunning images again. And one of the things I suppose I haven't really talked about is that I don't have a veg garden, as most people would consider a veg garden. So I don't grow in rows, and I don't grow in just polycultures of veg. At least 25% of every bed has got ornamentals in it to bring in pollinators. Actually, and I'm going to say it's all that. It's not to bring in pollinators. It's not to do anything other than because I love them. I love flowers, and it makes me feel lovely, and it makes me want to go out into the garden. And I go out and just go, oh, it's beautiful here. And then in amongst all those beautiful flowers, I'm growing food as well. And so I think quite a lot of the videos hopefully will show how pretty that garden is as well.
How much time do you spend gardening a week-ish, do you think?
So in the winter months, 0. And so February, March, my gardening very much happens at the kitchen table, where I'm certainly March when I'm starting to sow seeds. And maybe February, if there's a dry patch in February, if it's dry in February and March, I will go out into the garden and I will lift some weeds and I will clear away some debris. But I tend to not clear away stems and things during the winter. They're all left for the wildlife, and I'm still clearing them now. So as new growth is coming through, I'm kind of starting to now clear stems that have been left behind during the winter. How much time? Not nearly as much as you might imagine. Probably 4 hours in a week. I go out every morning. So except for during the winter, my going outside is limited to going out to the ducks to let them out for the day. But as soon as the weather has warmed a little, so by end of February, I will go for a walk every morning, even if it's just just to the veg garden and back rather than around the food forest and everything. But I do try and get out there and walk and just listen. Stop if there's a dry space to pause or just a fence to lean against. I'll just listen to see what's going on. And so things like yesterday, or maybe the day before, I heard the first cuckoo of the year. And through my whole life, I've never heard a cuckoo till we moved here. So somewhere up in the woodlands, there are cuckoos. And so I just stand and listen. In another 3 weeks, I'll be really bored of hearing it. But at the moment, it's if it's incessant cuckooing. But right now, it's a delight. It's like, wow, it's spring again. There's a lot of birdsong. And so I do that observation thing, and I do intentional observation. I will actually just go out and say, I'm not gardening. And actually what happens is I'll sit down and I might weed like the bit that's within arm's reach. I'm not going to move any further, so I might lift a few weeds. But mainly I'm listening and I'm looking and I'm feeling and I'm getting some sunshine on my face and I'm just being. And it's almost that kind of mindfulness thing. It's just spending a bit of time out there and being part of that whole thing.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful, Liz, because, like you're saying, this garden is a garden for you, and it's not just about you for food. It's that soul nourishment of being held by your garden and delighted by your garden and awed by your garden and its surrounds and just feeling part of that whole system. And I think, we can tend to be caught up a lot in the doingness of doing gardens, whereas actually just being the gardening, I think, is a really, really amazing and mindful practice. And like you're saying, it doesn't really take terribly much to actually do that, does it? Like you've got a couple of hours a week for the actual doingness, and the rest is the beingness, being part of it and observing and noticing, and then you become really easeful in the way that you can interact. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
It's okay. The nice bit is that as time goes on and the garden matures, there's less and less to do anyway.
I know, I sometimes feel guilty how little I do. Like, I should be doing more out there. And I was like, no, actually, that's looking pretty good. I enjoy, like you, wandering around, being part of it and listening and watching and seeing and tasting and plugging the gaps. Yeah. Plugging the gaps is a favourite activity of mine.
I know when we talked earlier in the year and you'd been away and you were saying you were going to come back and you couldn't, you weren't sure what the garden was going to be like. And I said, oh, please share it. And I'm so pleased that you made that video kind of showing the abundance of your garden, even when it had been unattended for a while.
Yeah, just it has a life of its own. And in whatever place we are, it can, if you really tend to the soil and tend to the diversity. And yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for joining me in conversation today. And I really encourage everyone to check out, if you haven't already come across Liz's work, to check out all the links you'll see in the show notes for this event. And you'll find links to her books, her YouTube, there's the podcast, your website, blog, your award-winning vlog, and all of the content that Liz creates so generously and abundantly. As abundant or even more abundant than her garden. So make sure to access all of that. And yeah, thank you, Liz. And I look forward to hopefully coming and being in your garden again this spring and seeing it in a different season with maybe less squishy underfoot and more abundant flowers going on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Morag.
Yeah, thank you.
Got an idea.